Welcome, everyone. I'm John Martin from AARP Rhode Island, and we are proud to introduce Catherine Taylor, who in May became AARP Rhode Island State Director. She succeeds Kathleen Connell, who served in that position for more than 20 years, and we wish her the very best today in her retirement. We thought a good way to introduce Catherine would be to record this Zoom video with the help of two of our volunteers. Phil Zarlengo is our volunteer state president, and Ruth Thumbtzen is a longtime volunteer who served in many leadership capacities as a volunteer, very close to our heart. We want to thank them both for being here. And then we're also joined by Jacqueline Augustin. She is policy director at Progresso Latino, with whom we've worked on a number of events and important issues. And we thought it would be a nice addition to the mix to bring in Jacqueline, one of our community partners, Progresso Latino, to ask Catherine a few questions. I know we're going to enjoy the answers. Catherine, welcome. Let's get started.
Thank you so much, John, and everybody for joining us today.
All right, let's get started with a question from Phil. Phil?
Catherine, tell us, what was your very first thought when you heard that AARP was looking for a new state director?
Thank you for that question, Phil. I still remember finding out that Kathleen was retiring from Darlene Reza-Rossi, who's the Associate State Director for Community Outreach. We were in a meeting together, and my initial reaction was I was dumbfounded that Kathleen Connell, who was, an institution in her own right, was retiring. I couldn't believe it. And then I thought, I wasn't looking for a job, so I didn't instantly think about myself for the position. I thought, oh, who would be good? I thought, oh, I better open this up and see, who I could think of. And I've read the job description, and honestly, I felt that it was describing me and everything that I could offer to Rhode Island. And as I read it and was thinking about whether I should apply, my husband reminded me that a couple of years before I had applied for another job that wasn't quite the right fit. And I had said to him at the time, what would be my dream job? My dream job would be Kathleen Connell's job, being the state director of AARP. And at that point I knew I had to apply. And I can tell you 6 weeks in, it is my dream job, especially working with all of you.
Well, she's been a dream leader for the staff. I can speak for all of us that we've gotten off to a very good start, an excellent start. And it's a steep climb. AARP's a very complicated organization because of the many facets of our work and the size of our organization. We're the largest volunteer-based organization in the United States. And we have offices across the country, and it's all coordinated. A lot of reporting and responsibilities and coordinating, and Kathleen's off to a great start. Catherine is off to, we make that mistake at least twice a day. Catherine's off to a great start.
Right.
All right, Ruth Thumbtzen has our next question. Ruth?
Thank you, John, and welcome, Catherine. I'm delighted to get an opportunity to work with you. My question for you is, please tell us a little bit about your background and how it prepared you for this important position.
Thank you for that question, Ruth. And it's absolutely a treat to be able to work with you. I have a background that when you look at my resume, it seems to be sort of very cut up. It's sort of like the Sesame Street, which is these things don't go together kind of thing. I spent 20 years as U.S. Senate staff for Senator John Chafee and then Lincoln Chafee. And I was a legislative advisor for a while on a whole host of issues, including, I spent 5 years on the Senate Environment Committee as staff, and I wrote a lot of speeches. So I did a lot in communications there. And when Senator Lincoln Chafee lost his election, I, with a colleague, started my own small business. So and did a lot of communications and policy and strategic consulting then. So that was very entrepreneurial. And then some of you might remember that that twice I decided to throw my hat in the ring, and I ran for statewide office twice, once for Secretary of State, my first attempt to follow Kathleen Connell's footsteps, and also for Lieutenant Governor, where I really wanted to focus on aging issues. And in between, I was the State Director for Elderly Affairs, now the Office of Healthy Aging. After I lost my second election, I spent the next about 4 or 5 years at the University of Rhode Island as an advisor at the Geriatric Education Center, the Geriatrics Workforce Enhancement Program, and the Ryan Institute for Neuroscience. And then the last 1.5 years at Rhode Island College directing Age Friendly Rhode Island, where I'd worked many times over the last decade with AARP, but in that role very closely. But you see, it's a career that's sort of, how do these pieces all fit together? But in this role at AARP, where there's a strong advocacy component, this need to know a lot about the state and federal legislature, an enormous communications component, the need to know policy, working with volunteers and with this wonderful staff, and doing a lot to improve how we live in Rhode Island. So that was my age-friendly work for the last 1.5 years. It all comes together in this one role, which is thrilling for me, because I think in every other job I've had, there's one piece of me that wasn't coming into play. And here everything I have to offer, I think, is a place where I can put it. So I'm just so grateful for that.
Thanks. You may have noticed we have been joined by Marcus Mitchell, who is another of our volunteers. And right on time, Marcus, because in our game plan here, you have the next question for Catherine.
Hi, Marcus. So glad you're with us.
Hi, Kathy. Sorry I'm late. I'm dealing with some contractors in my house who are tearing everything apart. So
It's
not the way I wanted it to.
We'll be prepared for the noise.
Yeah. So Kathy, I'm so glad that you're taking on this role, and look forward to being able to work with you. I wanted to ask you to tell us something that other people may not know about you. Hobbies and accomplishments, that kind of thing. So.
Sure. Well, I think, and this is a great question, because this is about, what makes me me, as opposed to, my professional life. One thing I think it's important to know about me is that I am the mother of 4 children, the youngest of whom is a crazy 18-year-old guy who has Down syndrome. So, and I hope you all get to meet him. He actually may turn up. He sometimes Zoom bombs my meetings. But being his mother is very formative to who I am, and has really kind of informed my advocacy around disabilities, and I think has made me a much more flexible and unflappable person. And and I'm a family caregiver too, so I think that's important to know. But also in terms of my hobbies, the things I love to do most involve being, a homebody, but I love to cook. I think I'm a pretty good cook. I hope you get to enjoy my cooking someday when we can all be together. And I love to garden, so I'll feed you in my garden. But you mentioned accomplishments too, Marcus. I've made my family promise that at my eulogy, at my funeral, that they will not forget to mention that I am a really excellent parallel parker. I am so great at parallel parking that it's an important thing. And one other thing, and I don't get a chance to do it very often, but earlier in my life, I did a lot of cartooning, and I was pretty good at capturing people's likenesses with just an oval and a couple of dots and a couple of lines. So maybe I'll have some time to fool around with some caricatures of you all at some point too.
That'd be great.
I have seen Catherine's garden, and she does have a green thumb. I can certify that. We're going to turn now. We're going to turn now to Jacqueline Augustin, Policy Director at Progresso Latino, a partner that we have worked with on a number of projects and events. Jacqueline, before your question, tell us a little bit about the work that you do in your community, and a little bit about how you're hoping we can work together. I know Catherine is anxious to have that conversation with you.
Sure, and thank you so much for having me here today. So I am the Policy Director at Progresso Latino. We primarily serve the communities of Central Falls, Pawtucket, and Providence. So my role right now is to figure out our policy agenda and what are some of the things that we want to focus on based on the people that we serve. So we serve youth all the way to the elderly. So keeping in mind that these are the people that we have the most direct communication and access to, we want them to help us inform what are some of the priorities that they have and bring those to the legislators and all of the other local policymakers that we have a constant communication with. So that's part of my job for the next couple of months, is figuring out that agenda. And I'd be more than happy to have these conversations about, what are some of the things that we should be focusing on right now.
We will have those.
I'm sure there's overlap, particularly when
yes.
it comes to older Rhode Islanders.
Most definitely.
In which race and ethnicity is hardly a factor. And that's great to share that common ground. We had fun with Progresso Latino too in the last couple of years. We sponsored a dance, and that was so much fun. I don't know, were you at that dance at the Knights of Columbus in Central Falls?
At that point, no.
we had a great time. And more recently, we provided funding for a project that your executive director, Mario Bueno, has guided to provide digital tablet devices for members on a loan basis to learn digital social media skills. And in some cases, that has reduced isolation, because now they have the skill to use even a phone or acquire a tablet or a laptop to be in touch with people. And we were very happy to do that. So you have a question for Catherine?
Yes, I do. Catherine, if you could tell us some of your immediate short-term goals.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. And I'm so excited to continue working with Progresso Latino. You've been such a great partner with me in my work in so many different configurations. So this is going to be great. So in terms of my immediate short-term goals, of course, the first one is to really, as quickly as I can, learn this very complex job and complex organization. And it's interesting because it's such a big organization. There are 2,300 AARP employees nationwide, and every other job I've ever had, I've just been pushed in the deep end of the pool and said, okay, swim. And in this role, my boss and the folks who in the organization are saying, it's really going to take you 6 months to a year to really learn it, which is, that's a little long. So I'm trying to, speed it up if I can. And of course, it's the end of the legislative session. And so immediate short-term policy goals are wins there, and helping our associate state director for advocacy achieves those wins. We've had a couple really already, and just in the last week, the codification of the Livable Homes Modification Grant, which is thrilling. I also wear a hat as a commissioner of the Governor's Commission on Disabilities. So we've been at it from that angle too. And also the Financial Exploitation Prevention Act for older adults. So some really good things are happening there. And then the third short-term goal is reentry into our office and into our community. So right now we are still all working remotely. That's an AARP company-wide policy. We will be dipping our toe in the water over the summer of returning to the office, and in September we'll all be back and hopefully welcoming the public in. But we don't know exactly what that's going to look like. We don't know exactly what that's going to feel like, since we're all used to this sort of interaction with each other. And how do we do that in a way that feels safe and comfortable, that feels connected, that feels authentic, and that doesn't cause disruption into the way we've learned how to be. We are working so well and so efficiently remotely via Zoom. And it seems like it was going to be hard at the beginning, but now we've cut out all sorts of things like driving from one meeting to another or commuting. How are we going to get all the same good work done when we add like normal life back in, and the amount of time it takes to have normal life? So those are the three things that I'm really looking at in the very short term.
Okay, Phil, we're back to you for another question for Catherine.
Thanks, John. Catherine, you mentioned earlier about working for Senator John Chafee. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about that. Must have been quite a fascinating experience.
Oh, that was another dream job. I worked for Senator John Chafee from the time I was 25 until the time he died 13 years later. So it was formative for me. And I was so grateful to have a leader like that. There are many, many lessons that I learned from him. And I think talking about that experience in terms of the lessons learned kind of captures the experience, and also informed the sort of leader that that I would like to be too. His management style was to make you just want to do your best. He would just, he just expected that we were all smart and would do our good work, be off on your way without too much micromanaging. And we lived in utter fear of disappointing him. That was the worst thing that could have happened to me, is if I disappointed him. And that was so motivating. But he just really did trust us. He inspired us to tell the truth at all times, just never dissembled or, sort of cut corners on the message. If you didn't know the answer, you were not to come up with something that might not be right. You were to say, I don't know, sir, but I'll find out. And that always stood us in good stead. He was a person who lived by the handwritten thank you note. It was really, really important to him. He always carried a copy of the Constitution in his breast pocket and a copy of the Boy Scout manual in his top drawer, and he pulled them out all the time to, that's not in there. And he was a quintessential or consummate environmentalist, to the point where he could be walking between his office building and the state capitol, and there'd be a piece of litter on the ground, and he would bend over and pick it up and put it into the trash. He would never pass by a piece of litter on the ground. And he was someone who, it was really important to stay in touch. He stayed in touch with people. He checked in with people. He picked up the phone. As I said, he picked up the fountain pen and wrote the note. And he was fearless and made you trust him. And his sort of catchphrase was, "Come on in, the water's fine." He said that about politics a lot, and I think that inspired me later in life to run for office myself and find my own voice. But thank you for that question, Phil. That's a very near and dear to my heart question.
He was certainly one of a kind. Those are great memories. Okay, we're back to Ruth Thumbtzen for another question. Ruth, unmute your microphone and ask your question. Unmute your microphone, Ruth. There you go.
Thank you, John. Listen to Catherine talk about Senator Chafee, Secretary of the Navy Chafee, and it's so moving. I met him several times as an NEA teacher, so it's nice to recall all those fun memories of this very special Rhode Islander. Catherine, I know you have a strong background on dementia. Where are we in the terms of meeting the needs of the growing older population, and to that, how, who will probably live longer, so many, and how are we going to be coping with those needs?
Thank you for that wonderful question, Ruth. And yes, I've spent a lot of the last 10 years working on how to serve Rhode Islanders who have dementia, but also, I worked at the George and Ann Ryan Institute for Neuroscience at URI, which is one of the wonderful research institutions in our state charged with finding a cure for Alzheimer's. And I will say we have come a long way. In 2012, 2013, then Lieutenant Governor Elizabeth Roberts and I, when I was State Director of Elderly Affairs, were charged by the General Assembly with writing the first state plan on Alzheimer's disease. And it really was doom and gloom. And, we were really focusing on how we were going to take care of the growing number of people living with dementia in our state while we waited for some sort of therapy or cure to happen. Fast forward 5-6 years when then Lieutenant Governor Dan McKee worked on the update of the state plan, and suddenly the mood among scientists is completely different. You know, the folks at Butler Hospital, the folks at Rhode Island Hospital, the folks at the Ryan Institute really feel that therapies, if not a cure, are actually going to happen in our lifetime. And so that's a really exciting thing. The other exciting thing that has happened since then is we've learned a lot about our own agency in managing our own risk factors for Alzheimer's. We understand better the combination between heart health and brain health, lifestyle factors and brain health. And we can see that in our population where the number of cases of Alzheimer's are growing because the population is growing, but the prevalence, you know, the percentage of people who have Alzheimer's, that's actually shrinking. And we, you know, there have been a lot of rigorous studies. One huge one is happening in Rhode Island right now to kind of see exactly how exercise and diet tie into your risk of Alzheimer's disease. We are looking at things like over that time, people have quit smoking. They have higher educational attainment levels. People are generally more fit and have a better sense of diet. And all of these things, you know, we're now connecting to our risk for Alzheimer's disease. And we're learning a lot too. And I think probably post-pandemic, we'll see after isolation, how did people do? Because social connectivity, lifelong learning, low stress level, those good sleep, those are all things that we're learning a lot too, possibly have a good connection. And the more we learn about that and the more we can put that into practice, I think, you know, combined with the fact that promising therapies are just around the corner, I think the outlook is bright for the first time since this terrible disease was discovered.
Fantastic. Thank you, Catherine.
All right. Thank you for that. I'm sorry I disappeared for a moment, but I came back just in time. A connection issue. We move on with a question from Marcus Mitchell. Marcus?
Kathy, I think this is a very timely question, I think. What can you tell us about AARP's efforts regarding diversity and inclusion?
That is a timely question, and one that I have to say, Marcus, I have been so impressed and gratified to find out as an organization, a large organization, what the focus of AARP is on this issue. There is a whole large office within AARP, the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, that has been created that is doing all sorts of internal work to make sure that all employees feel completely welcome and that they're contributing at the level that they should be, and that everyone has true respect and understanding for each other. And I'm just so pleased to have that internal sort of support and motivation to then take that as a state office and live that way in the community. We are supposed to be an organization for all people, so that all people can live their best lives as we live our best lives as we grow older. And we are absolutely charged with making sure that we are in all communities and that we are connecting with all communities, and that all people know that they have a wise friend and a fierce defender in AARP.
All right. Another question from Jacqueline. I think you may have answered a part of this question earlier, but maybe not all of it. Jacqueline, go ahead.
Yeah, I think you briefly touched on this. So the question is, when will AARP resume in-person events? And the second part is, how hard has it been to start a new job without leaving your home?
No, that is great. And I'll just reiterate, we are hoping that, you know, true, like back to normal in-person events will happen sometime after Labor Day, but stay tuned on that. Sometimes it looks like it's going to be sooner, and sometimes, you get scary news about the variants of the disease and of COVID, and you don't know where it's going to go. But we hope in September. No one really has a crystal ball on that. And then in terms of starting a new job during the pandemic, I suppose, in some ways, since I hadn't been at my last job for very long when we shut down, so I've been kind of used to working completely remotely. I don't know what I don't know. I don't know what it was like to be together with this fantastic staff in the office, on the Hill. And in some ways, I would say, I was talking to a younger friend of mine who also started a new job on the same day. And I said, it's almost easier to start this way because there are two parts of taking a new job, right? There's learning the job, and then there's learning your environment, the commute to the office, and where's the bathroom, and, what are what are your coworkers like in person? And so I get to sort of do it in two parts. By the time I have to figure out, how early I need to leave my house to get to work on time, I'll already know how to do the job. And so I won't be stressed out about that. But I am really, looking forward to seeing people in person.
It's very, very funny as a staff to have been working as closely in one sense as we have worked through the onboarding and addressing various issues and tasks. And we've never really met in person. I got with quite a complex series of approvals. I got to go to Catherine's home and take the photo for the press release. And we're all looking forward to having a routine together face to face, and then meeting and spending time with more of our volunteers and the people that we serve.
Yeah, I will say that half the staff I worked with before, and some, like with John, a while ago, very closely, and with Darlene very closely, but I've never met Matt. And I only just met Rochelle on our walkthrough of the office to see what that was gonna be like. Phil and I have never met in person, I don't think. And so it's, I can't wait until we can.
Phil, one more question from you. Unmute your microphone, sir. Phil, microphone. There you go.
Sorry about that, Catherine. This is a question I've been really waiting to ask you. As you know by now, we at AARP like to talk about the big issues, and how we can help our people. Tell me, what makes you most excited about the concept of aging in our country? That's one of those topics.
Oh, I think we could be here all day about that. I mean, I'm going to be really frank. Neither of my parents had the opportunity to grow old. And so I honestly cannot understand why people aren't really excited with every birthday that goes by. I just turned 60. Is my favorite birthday I've had so far. I can't wait for them all to come before me because they're just such a gift. And I feel really excited about aging in America because there are so many people now who believe what I believe and believe what AARP believes, that this is the best and most important stage in front of us, where we have the most to offer, and where there's so much advocacy around getting people to pay attention to what we have to offer. I'm going to go back to and talk about a mentor that I had when I was a young woman. I feel very, very grateful to have had my head screwed on right when I was in my early 20s. I had a lot of good things happening in my early 20s, right? I had Senator John Chafee, and then I had Mrs. Shea, who was my high school history teacher. And she was my mentor until she died. And she just, she gave me great advice. She was the one who actually sort of said I should be working in government. After college, I was trying to think of what to do. And she said, you belong in government. Pack a suitcase, get on a train, go to Washington, and don't come back without a job. But she also said to me this. She said, women in their 50s undergo a sort of renaissance. You're largely done with your caregiving at both ends of the spectrum. Physically, you're in pretty good shape. And then she said, and mentally, you're at the height of your powers. And there I was, 25 years old. I thought, all right, well, Mrs. Shea's never told me anything that didn't come to pass, so I believe this. And so when my friends were all turning 30 and giving each other black balloons and over the hill cards, when they were turning 40 and doing all kinds of unspeakable plastic surgery things to themselves, and when they were turning 50 and having midlife crises that just going off the deep end, I kept thinking, no. Mrs. Shea said 50 is going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome. And I lived my whole life looking forward to turning 50. And when I turned 50, she was right. It had all come to pass. And so I couldn't wait to turn 60, and I couldn't wait to be, ever since then, have been part of a movement, right, to get all of, at least Rhode Island, pointing yourselves forward into the future and getting excited about it. And I will say, not long ago, I read some research that says that your attitude about aging actually is a self-fulfilling prophecy, that if you have a negative opinion or negative view of your own aging, if you don't look forward to it, it takes more than 7 years off your life expectancy. It does. And I'll also add about, if you understand or have ever heard about the concept of blue zones, which were sort of coined by an explorer at National Geographic named Dan Buettner, and you can go on Google Blue Zones and see that he traveled to all these societies around the world where people routinely live to be in their 90s and over 100 completely healthily. So, there's one in Mexico, there's one in Georgia in the old Soviet Union. Remember the old Dan and yogurt commercials where the folks lived to be 100? Japan, I think there's one in California. And he talked about, he wanted to know what was similar in these societies that we could learn from. And this is a super long answer to your question, but I do want to get into this. And he saw that in terms of diet, these societies mostly ate plant-based diets and reserved meat for the Sabbath or celebrations, lots of fruits and vegetables, daily consumption of nuts, regular moderate consumption of wine or sake. Exercise is something that happens and as like the matter of course. You're not like setting aside time to go to the gym, but you're walking everywhere as your mode of transportation, or you're squatting, and so you're just fit. In terms of a role in society, the oldest people in these societies had a purpose, either to teach their skills to the younger generation or to care for children. They were really needed. And in terms of spiritual life, all of these communities, believed in some kind of higher power and set aside some daily or weekly time for meditation or prayer or worship. But the most important thing to me of all of this is that in each of these societies, the oldest people in them were the most important people. The most important people. And that means, right from the moment you're a little child, you are looking forward to when you get to be, the person being carried around on the sedan chair because, you're the sage elder. And think about that, what that does to your whole outlook on life. Can you imagine if we all felt that way about growing older, how different our country would be? So
wow,
that is a very long answer to that question.
You're getting a lot of affirmation from everyone who's listening right now. And we know that people who are watching the recording, which will reach many, many people, will really appreciate those comments. So we know what AARP's priorities are, and we know that there are legislative priorities, and we know that you have specific management priorities. But I think people really want to know what it is that you are most passionate about in this position, working for this organization. What really is it deep in your heart?
So, and this sort of is a continuation of my answer to the last question, John, and thank you for that, because I think a lot about the ageism that exists in America, and that the ageism that we all have about ourselves. I mean, we're ageist about ourselves. They're all things we do to deny or not plan for, or to avoid thinking about growing older because we think about it as negative. And we have really negative stereotypes about older adults. We call people geezers, you know, we laugh at, you know, at sitcoms that mock older people. And none of that is okay. And beyond that, that ageism is a serious headwind to all of the progress that we are trying to achieve. It's not like other things when you bring them to a legislature and you try to get good policy done. It's not where you're not just talking about the merits of the legislation. You have to first, you know, whack your way through all the ageism in the heads of the people that you're trying to convince. And so my most passionate goal, because as you said, right, AARP is advocating for financial security and health security and, you know, purpose and equality and digital equity and all these things that are so important for all of us, but especially older adults. But overarching all of that, and the reason why some of these are problems in the first place is because we don't really value older people. We don't look forward to aging. We have these ageist views. So my most passionate goal is to take all of the work that we are charged by AARP to do, and that I have the opportunity to lead in the state, and lay over this, you know, this, I won't want to call it a crusade, but it kind of is, but this overarching philosophy and message and joyfulness that I hope will change a lot of attitudes so we can just do a better job at making Rhode Island a blue zone and making it the best place that it can and should be to grow old.
I'm sure you got a lot of agreement on that. I want to thank our volunteers, Phil Zarlengo, Ruth Thumbtzen, and Marcus Mitchell, and Jacqueline Augustin for joining us from Progresso Latino. We look forward to working with your organization in the future. And now that the Assembly session has come to an end, you can recover and enjoy the rest of your summer, and we'll see you soon, I'm sure. I can say this, I learned a lot about Catherine. I've been working with her for the past 6 weeks, and I learned a lot of new things, and they are inspiring, they are enlightened, and I hope you soon have an opportunity to meet Catherine Taylor in person. Thank you for joining us today.